Have you ever wondered why some of the most awakened people around you seem to carry an invisible weight on their shoulders? Why do those who manage to see beyond the ordinary reality often struggle with a deep loneliness that few can understand? There's an uncomfortable truth about awakening that nobody wants to admit. The more you wake up, the more isolated you might feel. It's like receiving a detailed map of a territory most people don't even know exists. But now you have to navigate alone through landscapes your friends and family simply cannot see. Carl Jung warned about the psychological dangers of this journey. What he discovered about the human psyche reveals why so many awakened people face silent inner battles. Battles they rarely share, because they know few will understand. Get ready to discover the 8 hidden obstacles that awakened people face daily but prefer to keep secret. Some of these challenges might shock you. 1. Seeing too much. Imagine waking up one morning and suddenly being able to see through walls. At first, it might seem like a superpower, but what happens when you can't turn it off? What happens when you see things you wish you couldn't see? This is the reality for many people who have experienced spiritual awakening. They develop a kind of vision that goes far beyond what most people can perceive. When your awareness expands, you start noticing patterns everywhere. You see how people's words don't match their energy. You notice the fear behind someone's anger, the sadness beneath their smile, the emptiness they're trying to fill with shopping, drinking, or endless scrolling on their phones. You begin to understand the games people play without even knowing they're playing them. The problem is that this clarity can become overwhelming. It's like having the volume turned up on everything at once. You walk into a room and immediately feel the tension between a couple trying to pretend everything's fine. You watch the news and see through the manipulation tactics that most people accept without question. You observe your friends making the same mistakes over and over, driven by patterns they can't see. Jung understood this phenomenon well. He wrote about how increased consciousness can be both a gift and a burden. When you can see the shadows that others cast but refuse to acknowledge, when you understand the deeper motivations behind human behavior, it creates a kind of emotional weight that's hard to carry. The exhaustion that comes from this heightened perception is real and draining. You might find yourself avoiding crowds because the collective unconscious energy feels too intense. You might struggle to watch movies or TV shows because the programming becomes obvious and disturbing. Even simple conversations can feel hollow when you can see the surface-level nature of most social interactions. Many awakened individuals report feeling like they're watching life through a different lens than everyone else. They see the beauty and interconnectedness of all things, but they also see the pain, the illusions, and the ways humanity hurts itself. This dual vision, seeing both the light and the shadow simultaneously, can be emotionally taxing. The challenge becomes even more complex when you realize that this enhanced perception isn't something you can easily share or explain. When you try to point out what you're seeing to others, you might be met with confusion, dismissal, or even hostility. People often prefer their comfortable illusions to uncomfortable truths. This creates an internal conflict. Part of you wants to help others see what you're seeing, to wake them up to the patterns and possibilities you've discovered. But another part of you learns that forcing awareness on someone who isn't ready can damage relationships and push people away. The weight of seeing clearly also comes with a sense of responsibility. Once you understand how certain systems, relationships, or behaviors create suffering, it becomes harder to participate in them unconsciously. You might find yourself questioning everything, your job, your relationships, your lifestyle choices, because you can now see their true impact. Some people describe this phase as feeling like they're living in two worlds simultaneously. There's the world that most people inhabit, with its routines, distractions, and surface-level concerns. And then There's this deeper reality you've accessed, where everything is connected, where every action has far-reaching consequences, and where the spiritual nature of existence becomes undeniable. The intensity of this expanded awareness can sometimes lead to what feels like sensory overload. Colors might seem too bright, emotions too intense, and the suffering of the world too present. It's as if someone removed a filter that was protecting you from the full intensity of life. And now you're experiencing everything in high definition. Learning to manage this enhanced perception becomes a crucial skill. It requires developing what Jung called holding the tension of the opposites, being able to see clearly without becoming overwhelmed, maintaining compassion without taking on everyone else's pain, and staying grounded while accessing higher levels of awareness. 2. Alone in the crowd. There's a particular kind of loneliness that awakened people rarely talk about, the feeling of being completely alone while surrounded by others. It's not the usual loneliness of being physically by yourself. This is something deeper, more subtle, and far more painful. It's the loneliness of having experiences, insights, and perspectives that seem impossible to share with the people around you. Picture sitting at a family dinner where everyone is discussing their daily concerns. Work stress, the latest TV shows, weekend plans, neighborhood gossip. Meanwhile, you're processing profound realizations about the nature of existence, feeling deeply connected to the universe, or working through spiritual insights that have completely changed how you see life. The gap between your inner world and the conversation around you can feel like an ocean. This type of isolation isn't about being antisocial or thinking you're better than others. It's about experiencing a fundamental shift in consciousness that creates natural distance between you and people who haven't gone through similar changes. It's like learning a new language that most people don't speak, then trying to have meaningful conversations with people who only know your old language. The awakening process often involves periods of intense inner work, deep questioning of previously held beliefs, and experiences that are difficult to put into words. You might have moments of profound connection to something greater than yourself, or sudden understanding about the interconnected nature of all life. These experiences can be beautiful and transformative, but they can also be incredibly isolating when you have no one to share them with. What makes this loneliness particularly challenging is that it often comes precisely when you're experiencing the most growth and expansion. Just when you're discovering amazing things about yourself and life, you might find that your relationships become strained or distant. Friends might not understand why you're no longer interested in the same activities. Family members might think you've become weird or too serious. The disconnection can be mutual. As your consciousness expands, you might find that conversations about mundane topics feel draining or meaningless. This isn't because you've developed an attitude of superiority, but because your capacity for depth has grown. You crave authentic, meaningful exchanges about life's bigger questions, while the people around you might prefer to keep things light and surface level. Jung wrote extensively about individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are. He recognized that this journey often requires periods of solitude and can create temporary separation from your social environment. The person you're becoming might not fit into the same social circles or relationships that worked for who you used to be. Many awakened individuals describe feeling like they're living in a glass box. They can see everyone around them, and others can see them, but there's this invisible barrier that prevents genuine connection. They watch others living their lives, dealing with their problems, pursuing their goals, but it all feels somehow distant and disconnected from their own experience. This isolation can be particularly acute in romantic relationships. When one partner goes through a spiritual awakening while the other doesn't, it can create enormous strain. The awakened partner might feel like they're speaking a different language, while their partner might feel left behind or confused by the changes they're witnessing. The challenge is learning how to bridge these different levels of consciousness without losing yourself or becoming resentful. Some awakened people make the mistake of withdrawing completely from relationships that don't meet their new standards for depth and authenticity. Others try to force their insights and experiences onto people who aren't ready to receive them. Finding your tribe becomes crucial during this phase, but it's not always easy. You might need to seek out new communities, spiritual groups, or online forums where people are having similar experiences. Sometimes, this means accepting that your social circle might look very different than it used to. The loneliness can also serve a purpose in your spiritual development. Sometimes, isolation forces you to go deeper within yourself, to develop a stronger relationship with your inner guidance, and to learn to find wholeness within, rather than seeking it from external relationships. Learning to be comfortable with this type of solitude, while still remaining open to connection where it's possible, becomes an important skill. It's about finding the balance between honoring your authentic self and maintaining compassion for those who are at different stages of their own journey. 3. Carrying the world. When your awareness expands beyond your personal bubble, something unexpected happens. You start feeling responsible for everything and everyone around you. It's as if the moment you see the interconnectedness of all life, you automatically become the designated fixer for all the problems you can perceive. This overwhelming sense of responsibility can become one of the heaviest burdens awakened people carry. The shift usually happens gradually. First, you become more sensitive to the emotions and energy of people close to you. You can feel when your friend is sad, even when they're trying to hide it. You notice the pain your family members carry, the struggles your co-workers face, the loneliness of the elderly neighbor next door. This increased empathy feels like a beautiful gift at first. You're more connected, more compassionate, more aware. But then something more intense happens. You start feeling like it's your job to help everyone heal, to solve their problems, to guide them toward better lives. You see so clearly what's causing someone's suffering, and the solution seems obvious to you, so why wouldn't you step in? You want to save your friend from their toxic relationship, help your parent overcome their limiting beliefs, and guide your colleagues toward more fulfilling careers. This rescue mentality can consume enormous amounts of your energy and emotional resources. You might find yourself staying up late worrying about people who aren't even thinking about their problems. You take on other people's emotions as if they were your own. Their pain becomes your pain. Their struggles become your mission to solve. The burden extends beyond individuals to global concerns. Once you see how interconnected everything is, you might feel personally responsible for environmental destruction, social injustice, political corruption, and human suffering worldwide. You read the news and feel like every problem in the world is somehow your problem to solve. You see homeless people and feel guilty for having a roof over your head. You learn about factory farming and feel responsible for all animal suffering. Jung identified this pattern as inflation of the ego. When someone takes on responsibilities that are beyond their actual sphere of influence, it's a common trap for people who have had spiritual insights but haven't yet learned to integrate them wisely. The awakened person mistakes their expanded awareness for expanded responsibility. The exhaustion that comes from trying to carry everyone else's burdens is immense. You might feel like you're drowning in other people's problems while neglecting your own needs and growth. Your relationships can become unbalanced, with you always giving and others always receiving. You become the person everyone calls when they need help, but who do you call when you need support? This pattern often stems from a misunderstanding of what true service looks like. Many awakened people believe that having insights or abilities means they must constantly use them to help others. They confuse being helpful with being indispensable. They mistake their sensitivity for a calling to fix everything they perceive as broken. The reality is that everyone has their own journey to walk. People need to learn their own lessons, face their own challenges, and find their own path to growth. When you constantly rescue others from their experiences, you might actually be interfering with their natural development process. You rob them of the opportunity to build their own strength and wisdom. Learning to hold space for others' pain without taking it on as your responsibility is one of the most important skills awakened people need to develop. It means you can witness someone struggle with compassion and offer support when asked, but you don't make their healing your personal mission. The shift from rescuer to supporter requires developing strong boundaries and learning to trust that others have their own inner guidance and capability for growth. It means accepting that you can't save everyone, and that's not actually your job. Your primary responsibility is to your own growth and healing, which then allows you to serve others from a place of wholeness rather than depletion. This doesn't mean becoming cold or uncaring. It means learning the difference between compassion and codependence, between helping and enabling, between being of service and being a savior. True service comes from overflow, not from emptying yourself to fill others. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper and integrate your shadows and light, check out the SIM Method ebook. It's a concise guide that can help you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. 4. The special trap. There's a dangerous side effect of spiritual awakening that few people want to discuss openly. The subtle but powerful way it can inflate your ego and make you feel superior to others. This happens so gradually and cleverly that many awakened individuals don't even realize they've fallen into what could be called the special trap. It disguises itself as spiritual growth while actually becoming one of the biggest obstacles to genuine development. It often starts innocently enough. You begin having insights that others don't seem to have. You understand concepts about energy, consciousness, and the nature of reality that your friends and family find confusing or dismiss entirely. You can see patterns in human behavior that others miss. You feel more connected to something greater than yourself. These are all genuine gifts of awakening. The problem arises when your ego latches onto these experiences and uses them to create a new identity. The identity of being awakened or enlightened or spiritually advanced. Suddenly, you're not just someone having spiritual experiences. You're someone who is more evolved than others. You're part of an exclusive club of people who get it while everyone else is still asleep. This spiritual superiority can be incredibly seductive because it feels so righteous. You're not being arrogant about material things like money or status. You're being special about wisdom and consciousness. It seems like a higher form of ego and therefore more acceptable. You might catch yourself thinking things like, if only people would wake up like I have, or I can see what they can't see, or they're still caught in the illusion. The trap becomes even more complex because there's often some truth to these observations. You might indeed see things others don't. You might have genuine insights about how to live more consciously. The problem isn't with the insights themselves, but with how your ego uses them to create separation and hierarchy. Jung was particularly concerned about this phenomenon. He observed that people who touch transcendent experiences often mistake the experience for permanent attainment. They confuse moments of expanded consciousness with having achieved some elevated state of being. This leads to what he called inflation, when the ego identifies with transpersonal content and becomes grandiose. The spiritual ego is often more sophisticated than the ordinary ego. Instead of bragging about accomplishments or possessions, it brags about practices, experiences, and states of consciousness. It measures itself against others based on how many books they've read, what teachers they follow, how long they meditate, or how conscious their lifestyle choices are. This creates a subtle but persistent sense of judgment toward others who are living differently. You might find yourself feeling frustrated with people who seem unconscious or disappointed in friends who aren't interested in personal growth. You might lose patience with what you perceive as small talk or surface-level concerns. Without realizing it, you start treating awakening like an achievement that makes you better than those who haven't achieved it. The irony is that this attitude of spiritual superiority actually prevents deeper awakening. True spiritual growth dissolves the sense of separation between self and others, while the spiritual ego uses awakening to create more separation. Real wisdom brings humility and compassion, while the spiritual ego brings judgment and condescension. Many awakened people go through phases where they need to withdraw from certain social situations because the energy feels too dense or unconscious. This can be a natural part of the process, but it becomes problematic when withdrawal is motivated by a sense of being too good for those environments rather than simply needing space to integrate new awareness. The healing for this trap involves recognizing that everyone is exactly where they need to be in their own journey. The person who seems completely unconscious might be learning lessons you've already mastered, but they might also have wisdom in areas where you're still growing. Awakening isn't a linear progression where some people are ahead and others are behind. It's a multifaceted process where everyone has different gifts and challenges. Developing genuine humility means recognizing that having spiritual experiences doesn't make you a better person. It just makes you a person having spiritual experiences. The goal isn't to become special or superior, but to become more authentic, compassionate, and of service to life. 5. Knowing but not doing. One of the most frustrating experiences for awakened people is the gap between what they know and what they actually do. You can have profound insights about how to live authentically, understand the principles of conscious living, and see clearly what changes would improve your life, yet still find yourself stuck in old patterns, unable to implement what you know to be true. This disconnect between knowledge and action can be particularly painful for awakened individuals because their increased awareness makes them more conscious of their own inconsistencies. You might understand perfectly well that your job is draining your life force, that your relationship dynamics are unhealthy, or that your lifestyle choices aren't aligned with your values, but somehow you still don't make the changes you know you need to make. The problem often lies in the difference between intellectual understanding and embodied wisdom. Your mind might grasp concepts about conscious living, but your nervous system, emotional patterns, and subconscious programming are still running old software. You've downloaded new information, but you haven't completed the installation process that would actually change how you operate in the world. Many awakened people become voracious consumers of spiritual and personal development information. They read endless books, attend workshops, watch videos, and collect insights about consciousness, healing, and growth. They can speak eloquently about chakras, energy work, manifestation, and higher dimensions. They understand complex psychological and spiritual concepts that would baffle most people. But when it comes to making concrete changes in their daily lives, eating differently, establishing boundaries, changing careers, ending toxic relationships, or developing new habits, they find themselves paralyzed. The gap between their sophisticated understanding and their practical application becomes a source of shame and frustration. Jung recognized this as a common challenge in psychological development. He understood that real transformation requires more than just insight. It requires integration. Knowledge that stays in the head without making its way into lived experience becomes what he called mere intellectualization. It can actually become a defense against genuine change because it provides the illusion of progress without the discomfort of actual growth. Sometimes the knowing itself becomes a trap. You become so focused on understanding more, learning more, and gaining more insights that you avoid the messy, uncomfortable work of actually applying what you already know. It's easier to read another book about meditation than to sit with your anxiety for 20 minutes. It's more comfortable to study relationship dynamics than to have difficult conversations with your partner. The paralysis often comes from perfectionism and overwhelm. When you can see all the areas of your life that need attention, all the patterns that need changing, and all the growth opportunities available, it can feel overwhelming. Where do you start? How do you change everything at once? The magnitude of what you perceive as needing to be done can freeze you into inaction. Another factor is the fear of losing your identity. Even if your current patterns aren't serving you, they're familiar. They're part of how you know yourself. Making real changes might mean letting go of aspects of your personality, your social connections, or your lifestyle that have been with you for years. The unknown person you might become can feel scarier than the familiar person you already are. Even if that familiar person isn't happy, sometimes the knowing becomes a substitute for doing, because it feels safer. As long as you're in the learning phase, you don't have to face the vulnerability and uncertainty that comes with actually changing your life. You can stay in the comfortable role of student rather than stepping into the riskier role of someone actively transforming their existence. The bridge between knowing and doing often requires starting with small, concrete actions rather than trying to implement everything at once. It means choosing one insight and committing to applying it consistently, even imperfectly, rather than collecting more insights. It involves developing tolerance for the discomfort that comes with change and the patience to allow transformation to happen gradually. Real integration happens through practice, not just understanding. It requires a willingness to be imperfect, to fail, to try again, and to be patient with the process of embodying wisdom rather than just collecting it. 6. Empathy after awakening. Perhaps one of the most shocking discoveries for people on the spiritual path is that awakening doesn't automatically bring the happiness, peace, and fulfillment they expected. In fact, many people find themselves feeling more empty, lost, and confused after having profound spiritual experiences than they did before their journey began. This unexpected emptiness is rarely discussed in spiritual circles because it contradicts the promise that awakening will solve all your problems and bring lasting bliss. The emptiness often comes after the initial excitement and novelty of spiritual experiences begin to fade. In the beginning, everything feels magical and meaningful. You're having insights, feeling more connected, experiencing states of expanded consciousness, and it all feels like you're finally on the right path. You might feel like you found the answer to life's questions and that your problems will soon disappear. But then reality sets in. You still have to wake up every morning, go to work, pay bills, deal with difficult people, and handle the ordinary challenges of human life. The spiritual highs don't last, and you find yourself back in mundane reality, except now you have the added burden of knowing there's something more, but not being able to access it consistently. This can create a profound sense of loss and disappointment. It's like getting a taste of what paradise might feel like, only to find yourself back in regular life with the memory of how amazing you felt during those peak experiences. The contrast can make ordinary life feel even more flat and meaningless than it did before you started your spiritual journey. Jung understood this phenomenon as a natural part of the individuation process. He recognized that spiritual experiences often serve to break down old structures of meaning and identity, but they don't automatically provide new ones. There's often a period of emptiness and confusion between the dissolution of who you used to be and the emergence of who you're becoming. The emptiness can also come from disillusionment with the spiritual path itself. You might have started your journey with certain expectations about what enlightenment or awakening would look like, only to discover that the reality is much more complex and less glamorous than you imagined. You might realize that many spiritual teachers and communities have their own problems and aren't as evolved as they appeared to be. Sometimes the void appears because awakening dissolves many of the illusions and attachments that previously gave your life meaning. Your career might lose its appeal when you realize it's not aligned with your deeper purpose. Relationships might feel hollow when you can see through the social masks people wear. Entertainment and distractions that used to occupy your mind might no longer hold your interest. This stripping away of false meanings and shallow pursuits is ultimately positive, but it can leave you feeling directionless and empty while you're in the process of discovering what authentically matters to you. It's like renovating a house. You have to tear down the old walls before you can build new ones, and the demolition phase isn't particularly comfortable to live through. The emptiness can be particularly confusing, because it contradicts the narrative that spiritual growth always feels good and leads to more happiness. Many people expect that as they become more conscious, they'll automatically become more joyful, peaceful, and fulfilled. When the opposite happens, they might wonder if they're doing something wrong, or if the spiritual path is just another illusion. Another aspect of this emptiness comes from the realization that awakening doesn't fix your personality, your emotional patterns, or your human needs. You still get triggered, feel insecure, experience loneliness, and struggle with the same basic human challenges you always have. The difference is that now you're more aware of these patterns, which can sometimes make them feel more intense rather than less. The key to navigating this phase is understanding that emptiness isn't the opposite of fulfillment. It's often the precursor to it. The void created by the dissolution of false meanings and shallow attachments creates space for something more authentic and deeply satisfying to emerge. But this emergence takes time and can't be forced. Learning to be comfortable with not knowing, with uncertainty, and with the temporary absence of meaning becomes crucial during this phase. It requires developing trust in the process and faith that the emptiness is serving a purpose, even when you can't see what that purpose is. 7. Speaking to no one. Communication becomes one of the most challenging aspects of post-awakening life. You have experiences, insights, and perspectives that feel incredibly important and meaningful to you, but when you try to share them with others, your words seem to fall flat, confuse people, or worse, make them think you've lost touch with reality. It's like trying to describe colors to someone who was born blind, or explaining music to someone who's never heard sound. The frustration of not being able to communicate your inner world effectively can be overwhelming. You might have profound realizations about the nature of existence, experience deep connections with universal consciousness, or gain insights about healing and transformation that feel revolutionary. But when you try to put these experiences into words, they either sound crazy, pretentious, or simply don't convey the depth and significance of what you actually experienced. This communication barrier isn't just about finding the right words. It's about the fundamental difference in frames of reference. Your awareness has expanded to include dimensions of reality that others might not perceive or acknowledge. You're operating from a different map of reality, using concepts and experiencing phenomena that don't exist in most people's worldview. The challenge is compounded by the fact that much of what happens during spiritual awakening is inherently subjective and experiential. How do you explain what it feels like to merge with universal consciousness? How do you describe the sensation of your ego dissolving? How do you convey the knowing that comes not through thinking, but through direct experience of truth? Many awakened people report feeling like they're speaking a different language than everyone else. They use familiar words, but those words carry different meanings and significance for them than they do for their listeners. Terms like energy, consciousness, vibration, and awakening might be loaded with personal meaning and direct experience for the awakened person, but sound like abstract concepts or New Age jargon to others. The isolation that comes from this communication gap can be profound. You might find yourself editing everything you say, constantly translating your actual thoughts and experiences into language that won't alarm or alienate the people around you. You learn to speak in code, dropping hints about your inner world while being careful not to reveal too much. Jung emphasized the importance of finding ways to bridge different levels of consciousness through symbolism, metaphor, and gradual introduction of concepts. He understood that direct transmission of transcendent experiences was often impossible, but that patient, skillful communication could plant seeds of understanding in fertile minds. The temptation for many awakened people is to either withdraw completely from communication attempts or to become evangelical about sharing their insights. Neither approach is particularly effective. Complete withdrawal leads to increased isolation and missed opportunities for genuine connection. The evangelical approach often pushes people away and can make the awakened person appear unstable or fanatical. Sometimes the communication breakdown happens because awakened people forget that they once saw the world differently too. They might become impatient with people who are asking questions or expressing doubts that they themselves had earlier in their journey. They lose empathy for the natural skepticism and confusion that comes when someone is first exposed to expanded concepts of reality. Learning to meet people where they are, rather than where you wish they were, becomes crucial. This might mean talking about practical applications of your insights, rather than the mystical experiences that led to them. It might mean focusing on common ground and shared values, rather than trying to explain your entire spiritual worldview. The development of what Jung called ordinary consciousness, alongside expanded awareness, becomes important. This means maintaining your ability to engage with everyday concerns and communicate about mundane topics while also honoring your deeper insights and experiences. You learn to be bilingual, speaking both the language of awakening and the language of ordinary life. Finding others who share similar experiences and can understand your language becomes essential for maintaining emotional and psychological health. This might mean seeking out spiritual communities, online forums, or workshops where people are having comparable experiences. Having even one person who truly understands what you're going through can make an enormous difference in feeling less isolated. The goal isn't to make everyone understand your experiences, but to find appropriate ways to share your gifts and insights while maintaining authentic connections with people at all levels of awareness. 8. Coming back down. After touching transcendent states and experiencing expanded consciousness, one of the most challenging aspects of the awakening journey is learning how to integrate these experiences into ordinary human life. It's like returning from a mountain peak where you could see for miles in every direction, only to find yourself back in the valley dealing with traffic, grocery shopping, and mundane responsibilities. The contrast can be jarring and disorienting. Many people assume that once you've had spiritual experiences or achieved certain insights, you maintain that elevated state permanently. The reality is far more complex and humbling. Consciousness fluctuates. You can have a profound experience of unity and unconditional love on Sunday morning, then find yourself irritated by your neighbor's loud music on Sunday afternoon. You can feel deeply connected to the divine during meditation, then completely lose your center during a stressful work meeting. This fluctuation between expanded states and ordinary consciousness can be confusing and sometimes feels like failure. You might question whether your spiritual experiences were real, or wonder why you can't maintain that sense of peace and clarity you touched during peak moments. The gap between who you are in your highest states and who you are in your triggered states can feel enormous. Jung emphasized the importance of integration, the process of bringing transcendent experiences into practical, everyday life. He understood that the goal of spiritual development wasn't to remain permanently in altered states, but to allow those experiences to inform and transform how you navigate ordinary reality. The integration process requires developing what could be called spiritual maturity, the ability to honor both your transcendent experiences and your human limitations. This means accepting that you're going to have good days and bad days, moments of clarity and periods of confusion, times when you feel connected to everything and times when you feel isolated and small. One of the mistakes many awakened people make is trying to maintain peak states through constant spiritual practice or by avoiding anything that might bring them down from their high. They might meditate for hours, avoid difficult emotions, or withdraw from challenging situations. While spiritual practices are important, using them to escape from human experience rather than to engage with it more consciously can become another form of avoidance. Real integration often means becoming more human, not less. It means allowing yourself to feel the full range of emotions, to make mistakes, to have preferences and opinions, and to engage with the messy, imperfect reality of life on Earth. It means learning to find the sacred in the mundane, rather than only in special, spiritual experiences. The challenge is maintaining what you've learned from expanded states while fully participating in contracted states. When you're feeling triggered, anxious, or overwhelmed, can you remember the peace you experienced during meditation? When you're dealing with difficult people, can you access the compassion you felt when you were in a state of unconditional love? This integration process often requires developing a different relationship with your emotions and reactions. Instead of seeing anger, sadness, or fear as signs that you're not spiritual enough, you learn to see them as information and energy that can be worked with consciously. You stop trying to transcend your humanity and start trying to bring consciousness to it. Many awakened people go through a phase of spiritual materialism where they use their experiences to create a new identity and try to maintain it constantly. They might adopt spiritual personas, speak only in loving tones, or try to eliminate all negative emotions from their experience. This approach usually backfires because it creates internal pressure and denies essential aspects of human nature. The healthier approach involves what Jung called holding the tension of opposites, being able to contain both your transcendent experiences and your human limitations without trying to resolve the contradiction. You can honor the profound insights you've gained while also accepting your need for rest, pleasure, connection, and even occasional pettiness or irritation. Coming back down doesn't mean losing what you've gained. It means learning to express it through your humanity rather than in spite of it. The goal is not to become a perfect spiritual being, but to become a more conscious, compassionate, and authentic human being who happens to have access to expanded states of awareness. This integration ultimately serves not just your own growth, but your ability to be genuinely helpful to others. People are more likely to be inspired by someone who has clearly done deep inner work, but remains relatable and human, than by someone who seems to be performing spirituality or trying to maintain an impossibly elevated state.